Welcome to Unstuck with Highjoy Wellness Lab, the podcast where real people share the real stories behind getting their lives, their bodies, and their mindsets back on track. I'm your host, Bretton Hunt, and in every episode, we dive into powerful conversations with athletes, weekend warriors, health and wellness professionals, and everyday people who refuse to settle. These are the breakthroughs, the setbacks, the mindset shifts, the moments that get us unstuck. Today's guest has a powerful story rooted in sports, growth, and identity. She's competed as a two-sport athlete in soccer and basketball at Eastern Arizona College before making the jump to NAIA soccer in Tennessee. I had to make sure I got that right. How she's continuing her journey on the other side of the game, though, as a coach in New Mexico while earning her master's degree. She's also the host of the Soulful Project podcast, where she creates space for real conversations around purpose, self-discovery, and personal growth. I'm excited to dive into her journey and the lessons that she's learned along the way. She is Samantha Dodge. Samantha, how are you doing today?
Wow, what an introduction. I mean, thank you so much. I'm doing great. Thank you, Bretton, for letting me come on and share my story with y'all.
Yeah, no, thank you for taking time out of I can imagine you're pretty busy as a coach and then master's student. I'm sure you've got lots of things that you could be doing on a Friday night, but I appreciate you joining me for a little bit. So
hmm
go ahead and just introduce yourself a little bit. Tell us a little bit about yourself. However you want to do that, just what you're up to now, and what your life is like.
Yeah, of course. Well, Ms. Bretton gave a great introduction. I'm Samantha Madrid Dodge. I go by Sam. Currently, my husband and I are living in New Mexico, but that is not the only place we've lived the past couple of years. We've kind of bounced around a bit. Um, just to tag off of what you shared there, Bretton, I am a former student athlete in college. I played basketball and soccer, different schools, started in Arizona, went to Tennessee, loved it in Tennessee. Not just for the sport, but a lot of growth individually as well. And of course, that was also the first year that my husband and I were married, so we got to grow together in our relationship, which was so good and beautiful. And then we transplanted here to Las Cruces, New Mexico, and I'm just grateful for the opportunities to continue to be involved in the game, even though like I hung my boots up, so to say. And I'm done playing myself, but I'm sure we'll get into a little bit more of that. That's a little bit about me. Yeah, I'm studying my master's in social work here at NMSU. I have a long-term goal. I want to be a therapist.
Okay.
I think I don't know where that'll be, but I do have a deep passion for young people and for youth, and I think that stemmed a lot from being around the game all my life.
Cool. So just maybe some type of a youth counselor or like maybe sports counseling and anything like that kind of pique your interest?
Yeah, I mean, I've thought about it. We need good therapists out there, and I think it's neat to have the dual dimension of sport and therapy.
Mhm.
And so my undergrad is in coaching actually, and then my master's is going to be in social work. So it's nice to be able to touch into those things because a lot of people in general, not just coaches, I feel are just misinformed and don't know too much about the world of mental health, and that's such a big world for athletes. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I would agree with that. I feel like that's something that's kind of become more and more popular. When I got home from my mission from Lima, that was something I remember an NBA player coming out and saying he was struggling with depression, and I thought that was the weirdest thing I'd ever heard. Wait, how could you be suffering from depression? But I agree with you. That's something,
Mm,
especially nowadays, that is much needed amongst athletes just in general, and especially the youth.
mhm,
So kind of talking about your athletic journey, you had a pretty unique one. You were a dual sport athlete at Eastern Arizona College, playing soccer and basketball, and soccer was relatively new at the time that
mhm.
Eastern Arizona had it. I don't know how many years it had been around when you started, but so relatively new program there. Then you make the jump, like you said, to Tennessee, into NA or NIAI. I think I got that right. What was that transition like going from Eastern Arizona to Tennessee? And also, if you could touch on the difference, what is the difference between Division One and NAIA? Like, what is the difference between those
Mm.
types of schools?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of vocab you could say that goes into the collegiate world, especially with athletes. So yeah, let me break it down a little bit. Well, my experience personally, when I went from playing at Eastern Arizona, which is a JUCO or a junior college, that's pretty much just a 2-year school, right? So you get your gen eds knocked out, your simple education done there, and then hopefully if you still wanted to play, you could transfer out to a bigger school, maybe a D2, maybe a D1, right? Or an NAIA. And for me, I mean, I could tell like the whole story of how like I don't know what the word is. It's my journey is just not normal, like you mentioned, right? But the main difference, I'll just say real quick, between NAIA, D1, and all that is NAIA is mostly consisted of by like private universities across the nation, and whereas D1, D2, some of those other ones are public schools, and so that's a main difference on that side of the board there. So dialing it back, my beginning journey at JUCO started with basketball. And this was back in 2019. So just before COVID, right? I had graduated high school and I had a deep love for both sports, for basketball and for soccer. But at that point, I had to choose. I had to choose which one I wanted to do because soccer did not exist at EA at that time in Arizona. So it was go play somewhere else, go play soccer somewhere else, or go to EA and play basketball. And I chose basketball. And I think here's why. It might sound a little strange, but although I love basketball and soccer, basketball felt a little more challenging for me. And so in that light, it was more fulfilling.
Okay.
Soccer, I loved it just as much, but it just came a little bit easier to me. And so at that time in life, I wanted to chase the challenge, right? And I was just coming off a shoulder surgery my senior year of high school. So I ended up redshirting that year for basketball at EA. But EA has had a great program throughout the years, great coaches. They've always done super well. So I got to play with some of the top players in the country, right? And train with them. And that was super rewarding for me and helped me to grow while I was healing, at least in that time. Fast forward 2 years. So after COVID and all, I had also gone on a mission. And I went to Florida on a service mission for my church.
Awesome.
And when I returned, there had been a coaching shift in the staff. And for any other like collegiate athletes out there, like if you hear that, that's kind of you're kind of nervous. You're not really sure because say you had a promise with one coach, and then a new coach gets hired. It's almost like your promise to come back and play. It's really just on edge. Like you don't know if you actually can, right? And so that's kind of where I was. I reached out to the new coach and I said, "Hey, this other one said I could play when I come back from my mission. Would you be down to let me try out, or still continue with that?" And they were super down about it. She's super awesome coach. Let me come do a little just walk through right after my mission and said, "Yeah, come back and join the team." So played basketball 2022 and graduated from EA 2023. And then here's where I shifted to soccer. So lots of kids right after you're graduating or making a change in life, you get really stressed sometimes in making that decision. And at that point in my life, lots of things had fallen through and I didn't have a plan for the fall. However, I did feel guided or prompted to ask the new soccer coach. It was the first time that the program was going to be there. I felt just prompted to ask if I could try out. So I did. I went up to the new coach and I was like, "Hey coach, can I try out for the soccer team?" And he just looked at me and was like, "Are you good?" And I was like, "Well, yeah." And I didn't mention to him then that I actually hadn't played soccer since high school, right? So that was like 5 years. Kind of crazy thing about it.
Yeah.
And he was like, no, yeah, come try out. Yeah, so he let me come try out. And this is crazy, guys. I tried out once, and he was like, yeah, I want you on the team. Miraculous. I really do feel like a lot of my journey has definitely been God-led. And so I don't want to leave that out because God has guided me specifically with my sport journey. I feel like he knew that was my ticket to a lot of experiences in life, and that was definitely one of those moments there. So got to play on the inaugural soccer team at EAC
Awesome.
and had a fantastic season. 2023, fall 2023, got to co-captain that team, and I still wanted to play. I just started picking up soccer again after 5 years, and I loved it. Remember, I mentioned earlier, like it just came to me so much easier than basketball. So my coach helped me look for some schools, and Tennessee was one of them. I visited a couple, but I felt Tennessee felt familiar, even though I'd never been there. The school felt familiar, the people did, the coach did, and so I took that as a sign that I needed to go. And Tennessee, like I said, it was way more than just soccer. It was one of the greatest experiences to help me grow as a person and to heal other things in my life. But the soccer aspect was pretty great. And the athletes that were on that team that play on that level, mind you, like even though NAIA and D1 aren't the same, like one's private, one's public, you still have high level athletes. You still have high performers. And on this team specifically, I competed with tons of international players and girls from across the world, and players who had played for like their pro clubs back in their country, you know.
Wow.
And so every day it felt like, am I really here? Like, am I qualified to be here? You know, I had a little imposter syndrome sometimes because they were super good, but I did transition well and bonded with a team. And again, a high-performing team, ranked top 25 in the nation.
Wow.
So that's a little like timeline, I guess, from like how I shifted from basketball to soccer, and then finished in Tennessee.
Awesome. And what position did you play in soccer?
Yeah, so in soccer, yeah, I missed that, I guess, huh? Basketball, I was more of a shooting guard.
Okay.
Soccer, at EA in Arizona, I played outside back, but my position is midfield. So when I was in Tennessee, I played midfield.
Awesome. Well, that's really, really cool. Congrats on that accomplishment. That's, like you said, no matter and even if it's D2, D1, or NAIA, you're playing with some really, really good athletes, and that's really, really cool. So, but playing two sports is not easy, right? Especially even at a JUCO, when you're playing at Eastern Arizona College. What drove you to want to do that? What was it that was so captivating about that particular challenge?
Well, I guess if you break down the term dual athlete, it can be understood in two ways. Dual as in you're doing two sports at the same time, or dual as in you do multiple sports at different times, you know. And I was the second case, but there was a lot that had happened in my experience with basketball and JUCO that was tough, hard. Like I mentioned, it was a challenge. Basketball is a challenge for me. I am like 5'7.5", 5'8" on a good day. I'm really not that like strong or thick. Like I'm not your basketball player. You know, I'm not your tall person that gets all the boards or anything like that. I wasn't really an impressive looking athlete when it came to basketball, and so I really had to fight through that a little bit, you know, mentally, and work really hard to get through that. And so after kind of being in that grind for those years that I played basketball, I loved it. But it was a bit of a love-hate, a little bittersweet, you know. And I think there was a part of me inside that wanted to find that love for sports, like in a more free-flowing way that I had once felt back in high school. And I thought, well, maybe soccer could be that. Thankfully it was, it's, again, so people hear the phrase, you learn to ride a bike, you could probably pick it up later, right? Once you learn how to ride a bike, you can do it at another time. It kind of felt like that with soccer. It literally just, I paused in high school and it came back to me in college. And there was things I had to grow in because I'd been playing basketball, but it wasn't too much of a shift to change from high intensity basketball to high intensity soccer. Different kind of endurance, different kind of conditioning, but you have the same mindset.
Yeah.
You have the same goals, right? So both sports blessed me immensely, just in different ways. They taught me different lessons, for sure.
Awesome. So now I want to kind of talk a little bit about your experience in Tennessee. Right? You mentioned that was a good place for you, to grow not only in sports, but also as a person. So what would you say the biggest transition was for you going from Eastern Arizona College, playing with those athletes there, to then going to Tennessee, playing with these athletes? Like you said, some are from different countries, playing at the top level of their countries. What was the main challenge or hardest transition for you physically, mentally, emotionally, going through all that?
Oh, that's a great question. Oh, man. Let's start with this analogy. A lot of people would probably relate to this. You go from middle school, you start middle school, you feel like the underdog. At the end of middle school, you're the top dog. Same thing in high school, right?
Yeah.
You start as a freshman and you're like, what am I doing here? And then you get to your senior year and you're like, yeah, I rule this place. Like, this is my gym, or this is this is me. Similar analogy from that transition, JUCO to NAIA. Not in like a prideful way. That's just an analogy I can relate to it. Being at EA, it was a young team, young squad. Really, it's just freshmen. It was the first year that we played as a team. It was an inaugural season. So there's not technically any sophomores. There's not technically any like leadership. We all just had to bond together and create something great, And so even though my co-captain Emma and I had to lead this team, this was our first experience, But at the same time, because of that, we felt so competent and so confident that we could do anything. Like, because we felt like we were the top dogs. And so transitioning from that, going up to the next level at NAIA, there's a little bit of that humble pie. Not that's the simplest way to say it, because it really wasn't like a prideful sense, but just realizing, holy cow, like you've not seen anything yet. You do not know the type of athletes that are out there. And again, EA, just to put in perspective for people, it is a small town, middle of nowhere, nearest airport, 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
It's like middle of nothing. Going to Tennessee, it's 30 minutes outside of Nashville. So you got the airport there, you've got the Nashville Soccer Club right there. Like it's a city, it's a bigger place. And so obviously the experience people have with the game is higher. So that was a big transition for me, to go from that small town to city feel. And then as well from the freshmen at EA on that soccer team, shifting into a team that had already been built for years and coached by a fabulous coach. Just a solid program with experienced players. And I actually liked that. I really did, because inside of me, I felt like, if he feels like I can be here, I need to believe that I can be here and that I do belong with this team, even though in my head right now, I'm kind of idolizing everybody, and that might be a relatable feeling for some collegiate athletes when they first step in, or as a freshman, or as a transfer student, because I was a transfer student, transferring to that school. So it was humbling, yet it made me hungry, to keep growing with that level of athletes.
That's awesome. I think that relates a lot, not just in sports, but even in just everyday life, whether you're starting a new job, whether whatever it is, you might just feel, man, there's so many people out here that are so good at X, Y, or Z. And I thought I was good at this. And, kind of like you were saying, do I really belong here? Right.
Hmm.
So, but like you said, you have to remind yourself, hey, I'm here for a reason. I was chosen for this job or for this, or to be on this team for a reason. So yeah, I do belong here. And I'm, like you said, should make you hungry to go and prove it, and then some, right? Like,
Well said. Well
so,
said. Yeah.
all right. So a big theme of the podcast is getting unstuck. And we kind of touched on it in the beginning, just talking about kind of the mental health side of things. And because I think a lot of times in our lives, regardless of where we are, we can get stuck, whether it's mentally, whether it's spiritually, whether it's physically, you name it, you can get stuck. And I'm sure you've dealt with being, quote, stuck in your life, a handful of times. So was there a time during a season that you could share with us where you felt like I'm stuck, whether it was stuck physically, mentally, however you were stuck, and what did you do to help yourself get unstuck from that situation?
Well, I just want to highlight, I guess, real quick that what a fabulous reframe, what a fabulous perfect perspective shift, going from feeling stuck to realizing you can be unstuck.
Mm-hmm.
Several experiences come to mind right now. I'll start with back playing basketball at my JUCO. This is one that stands out to me the most. So my second year there was post-mission, aka 18 or so months, not really training like a typical student athlete would be training for college. Because in college, you're in season or you're in season. Like,
Yeah.
Yes, you have the season when you're playing games and everything, but everything else that people call off season, you're still like in season because you're still training and you have your weights and conditioning and all the things, right?
Right.
So I had this time of life without that, and kind of set me back a little bit mentally, in my head, because I come into this team and it's like they've been playing and practicing for the past couple months. I just came back from a mission trying to get back into some sort of shape, and how can I contribute and not feel like I'm just the last man on the squad, and so again, that was a challenge, but something that made me excited, made me dig deep. I definitely think that growing up in a small town like I didn't mention this earlier, but I'm also from a small town. Graduating class was like 90 kids. Wow. And there's like one stoplight in the town. So tight-knit community, but you learned how to work hard young. And that's carried with me my whole life. So when I got to this time of life at my JUCO, it stuck with me then too. This mentality of hard work, this underdog mentality, and yet like I'm gonna go get after it at the same time. And I'm telling you, I was doing it all. Like, I was doing the extra work, I was doing the overtime, putting it in, the extra reps, whether that was shots, whether that was runs or reps or things like that, right? And got to a point where personally it felt like, what more can I do? I'm getting up early and I'm doing extra things I don't have to be doing. Yet that's a mentality you should have as a collegiate athlete. And I wasn't seeing the results. And that is something that a lot of athletes will relate to for sure. Putting in the work and feeling like you're not seeing results. And I sat down one day with my assistant coach of that basketball team. And I was just like, you've seen the kind of work that I've been putting in. You guys know my work ethic. And something that would drive me crazy is like players that were so good sometimes took it for granted because they wouldn't put the extra reps in. They wouldn't do the overtime work because maybe the game came naturally to them, or they're taller than everyone, or faster, or just those things were easier to them. And for me, it wasn't, right? And so that bugged me a little bit. I was like, you guys, imagine how good you could be if you had the kind of dog that I have. Mm-hmm. And some of the coaches actually mentioned that a couple of times, But anyways, I sat down with this coach and I was just like, what else can I do? I feel like I'm giving it all. And something that highlights this as well is I was one of the captains that year, and it was hard to see other captains playing, and I wasn't as much, right? I had very few minutes, and it just seemed to decline as the season went on. And then I had this shocking realization and turning point that really helped me after this conversation with this assistant coach. And as I mentioned earlier, God's such a big part of my life. And so faith is also tied to my journey and my sport journey. And I realized I had never really understood what faith meant till I was sitting on that bench talking with my coach right then that night. Because I had previously thought faith is like hoping for things which are not seen and having these wishes and working for it, right? But what I misunderstood was, in my head, I thought if I work hard enough, if I do the overtime, if I put the reps in, I will get what I want. And then the light bulb went on, and I realized faith isn't getting what you want. It's continuing on when you don't get what you want. That's faith.
Wow.
And that was a reframe that really changed a whole lot of things in my life, but it helped me in that moment, in that feeling stuck, feeling like there's nothing else to do. What else can I do? And just that reframe and change of perspective, it helped me to be content, not satisfied, but content with who I was becoming and what God had given me, and realizing that the reason that I was there on the team wasn't to be one of the 5 players on the court, one of the starters. Other people had those roles. Other people were filling those spots. And what the team didn't have was me. And I needed to show up in my role every single day, because no one was going to be more hyped than I was. No one was going to be so supportive of my team than me. And I embraced that role after that day, and it changed so much for me because I finally understood the importance of roles. And that's a hard lesson for athletes to learn. The importance of roles, but at the same time, not dropping in work ethic. Keeping the same intensity, the same work ethic, because no one's ever going to take that from me. No one's ever going to be able to take my dog away from me, my energy inside and the hype that I have and the love for the game. And I just try to embrace that, and that helped me a lot at that time in life. And then if I can just share Tennessee, I had an experience as well. Shifting over there, again, it was a similar scenario, but soccer, when I had switched at EA, all of a sudden, I was playing, I was starting, I was captain, things were going great, like, I was feeling it again, I was feeling the vibes, and then I transferred to Tennessee, and it's all those high-performing athletes, experienced athletes, played on who knows how many clubs in their lifetime, and I got 0 clubs that I played for. And so I learned again, after feeling like, is this going to be my last season playing soccer? A lot of people face that in high school.
Yeah.
I feel grateful and fortunate enough that that thought process lasted longer and that I could deal with that a little bit later in life. But yeah, being in a space where, again, I was working so hard and I was kind of capitalizing and performing well every practice, and then not getting the opportunities in the games like I had hoped for. So I had to reverse back and remember that that vital lesson about faith and what it meant. And also, it gave me a time to mentor my other teammates who were in a similar boat but didn't have my mindset. And so I was able to help them grow personally in their lives and as athletes because they felt very, very stuck. And I had already learned how to get unstuck before. So being able to apply that for them was really powerful to witness them change, but also that I was able to help them to do that. That's one of the most powerful things in life is giving back to someone else. There's no high that's better than that. There's nothing that fills your soul more, game-winning shot or assist or whatever it is. Those feelings are so real, but there's nothing more greater than being able to give back to someone else, especially from what you learned yourself.
That was really cool. Thank you for sharing that. I've never heard a definition of faith like that, and I really like that. Even when things aren't going your way, when you're putting in all the work, you got to keep going. You got to keep showing that faith, and that was really, really cool. I really appreciated that. And another thing too that I like that you said is you mentioned your work ethic didn't change, right? It wasn't this realization that, oh, well, okay, yeah, I guess I'll keep going, but I'm not going to keep working. I'll just slack off. It was like, no, I'll keep doing it. Right. And I think that is key, because you don't know who you're affecting who's watching you do that. I think of a story, of the U.S. men's team. I think it was 2008 when they went, I think it was Beijing Olympics, but they had lost 4 years ago for the first time in a really long time, the U.S. men's team, and they got bronze at the Olympics. And that was just, for a long time, that was just not okay, right? The U.S. always dominated in basketball. And so they put together this team, and Kobe Bryant was on the team. And a lot of people know Kobe. He was ruthless, right? But his work ethic was as well. And there was a story I watched in the documentary, and I don't remember the player, but he was like, I'm going to get up and I'm going to beat Kobe to the gym, right? That was his goal. I'm going to beat Kobe to the gym. And so he got up at like 4:30 or some crazy time that he got up, goes down to the gym, and Kobe's down there, and he's changing his shirt because he just sweat through his shirt. And he's like, oh, hey, nice of you to join me. Right. And it's like, and he said, seeing Kobe up at that early of an hour, eventually the whole team started doing it. But Kobe didn't tell him to do it. He just led by example. And I mean, Kobe obviously started and all that, and he was amazing. But I think you probably affected so many people just by staying who you were, true to yourself. Like, I'm working hard regardless of what's happening. And that probably affected a lot more people, some that you might not even know. And so I think that's really, really cool. And I commend you for that, because I think it's very easy in those moments to, one, not even exercise faith in that way and just give up. So I think that's really cool.
Thank you, Bretton. I appreciate that.
So looking back on that experience now, and those two experiences that you shared, how have you taken those lessons now? Because now you're coaching. How have you taken those lessons now and applied it to your now athletes that you are helping coach? Because I'm sure there's a lot of those similar feelings where, coach, I'm putting in all this work, I'm trying to do this and that, and I'm not seeing the results. How do you now implement it with your athletes?
Yeah. I love the role that I have right now, helping out on the NMSU women's soccer team, because it's not like I'm the head coach or the associate. I'm one of the assistants. And so, again, with roles, you have a different space to fill. And I love that I'm still, young in age enough to relate to a lot of those athletes. They're not that much younger than I am, or some are the same age, And number one, they feel like I know them. Just simply because I'm their age. I meet them where they're at. Like, I know what they're experiencing. One of the roles, things that I was able to do this past season with the team is my job was, whenever the team traveled to an away game. not everyone travels.
Mm-hmm.
There's something called a travel roster, and you have to work to get on the travel roster. And so the girls that didn't make the travel team for that game, they'd have to stay behind on campus. And my job was to train those girls the entire time that the team was away. And so I understood pretty quickly, pretty early on, that a lot of those girls really didn't want to be on campus. Like, they would rather be at the game. Me too. I mean, honestly, who wouldn't?
Yeah.
It's kind of a bummer that you didn't make the team for that game or whatever. And so I knew going into training these girls that I wasn't going to be this non-loving, harsh kind of coach to them. But instead, I wanted to approach it as time to grow in other skills and not just in soccer. So we would do tons of different things in our trainings that I would have with them. But more often than not, I would sit down and talk with them at the end of practice. Let them open up, get pick their brain about different things and thoughts, and ask them questions. And in that space, they felt heard, listened to, known, and loved. And a lot of athletes miss that in college, depending on their coaching staff, because coaches, unfortunately, they can try to be as student focused or as person focused as they can, but at the end of the day, their job relies on performance, and they're going to get that out of their athletes. So I am glad that at least right now, the space I'm able to fill is to meet those girls where they're at and help them to feel seen and heard, because they're working hard. They're just not getting those results, just like I was, or as I was hoping, So they feel those same things, and because I went through that, I almost feel empowered to walk along them in their journey now. And it's probably like that for anything in life, right? People who have gone through things that now you're going through, they relate so much more than anyone else could. So those are just some things that I've noticed, at least from this past season, helping out on the D1 soccer team, transferring my experience to their experiences, and helping them to know that they have a role still, even if they're not on the travel squad.
That's awesome. So as you sit down with these girls, so I didn't know there was a travel roster, so that's news to me.
Yeah.
So but that makes sense that they wouldn't carry everybody over. So what would you say that, you try and emphasize with those people and in the space that you're in as a coach? What is the main thing? Because like you said, most coaches are performance based, not because they don't care about their athletes, but more because that's what their job depends on, is the performance. So that, like you said, they're going to pull that out however they can pull it out. So what do you emphasize with your players? You kind of touched on it a little bit, but what is the main thing that you try to help your players understand? Like, hey, Coach Dodge, she really wants me to focus on X, right? She might not care as much about performance. She really emphasizes this.
Mm-hmm. In college, you specifically hear the term a lot, student athlete, and coaches sometimes joke about this, but I mean, they're serious at the same time, but they're like, you're a student first, then you're an athlete. I like to take it a step back even before that, because young people are very consumed with labels and titles or roles that they have, because underneath it all, they're in the time of life and a chapter of life where they are trying to discover their identity and who they really are and why they're here, or what's their purpose in this chapter or that chapter or in life in general. And so, again, dialing it back, yes, they're students, yes, they're athletes, but they're people first. And while their quote-unquote job is to be a soccer player, to be an athlete, that's how they're paying for their school through a scholarship, essentially, they still have experiences as a person, as a soul here on this earth. And some of my influence if you'd like to put it that way, extends a little further than just the one-on-one interactions on the field. I have started a page on Instagram, the Soulful Project. I'm sure we'll jump into this later. I intended it for a podcast, but it actually expanded beyond that, and I didn't know that that's what it would be at the start. But starting it a year ago, I have since fallen in love with creating content in a way that speaks the experiences of other people. In other words, putting words to what people have felt and they didn't know how to describe. And again, that's probably that social worker in me, that therapist in me, trying to tap into that space. But a lot of the athletes, a lot of the girls on the team follow me and follow that page and see that content. And so they know that Sam is not just 1D. Like, I'm 3D. I have so many dimensions to me, and I'm trying to be as raw with them about embracing their mind, embracing their mental health, embracing emotions that can be uncomfortable, and realizing that that is life. That is life. That's the game, but that's life. And letting that space just be safe for them, So I know that's not really a specific example, but that's a way that I've tried to incorporate all levels of my life and my interactions with my athletes to be very raw and real, so they know I'm not just on my pedestal telling them what to do, but I'm in the trenches with them, and I know exactly what they're going through.
That's awesome, because I was not a collegiate athlete. I played football and basketball in high school, but the coaches that I still am in contact with and that I, respected a lot more are the ones that treated me like that I knew there was more to them. They treated me as a person, right? They cared about me individually. They cared about me off the field. And I think that's really, really neat that you're now taking that into the Division One women's soccer out there at New Mexico. That's really cool. So now kind of back to you now. How do you're doing a lot. You've got you've got the Soulful Project podcast and all that we'll get into in just a second. So you've got that going for you. You're a wife, you got a husband. We're high maintenance sometimes, so you got that. You're still in school. Like, you might not be a student athlete, but I would still say you're kind of a student athlete. You're coaching.
Yeah.
You've got grad school. My wife's in grad school right now. That work is hard. It's not, we think, at least I thought, senior year of college, that's hard stuff. No, it's even a step further than that. So you've got a lot going for you. How do you manage all of that without burning out, without just burning yourself out?
Well, I'm not going to act like Superman on here. I will say there are days that do feel burnt out. And honestly, that is just a kind reminder from my brain that is telling me, Sam, you didn't take enough time today to regulate. I love to be busy and to have so many things in my life. I would just die of boredom, like, honestly. And I've had chapters of life where I had to focus on rest, and that was really, really hard. But this is a time of life and a chapter that there is something every second of every day, whether, like you said, it's my classes for grad school, or it's my part-time job, my internship, coaching, being a wife, going home, like doing your homework. It's just nonstop, right? And so, but going back to the regulation, studies have shown that whenever we are switching from one activity to another activity, our brain is dysregulated. And we don't take enough time to reset our brain, or to re-regulate ourselves in between all the activities that we have going on. So I've really tried to focus on that lately after learning that. And regulation, it can be really, really simple. If I could just break that word down, most people would be more commonly understand breath work, or finding some kind of breathing pattern that can help them slow down in their voice, in their mind, That's a very, very simple way to regulate your brain in between a lot of things that are going on. So I've paid more attention to honestly how I feel in between all those things, because some of my work can be heavy. At my part-time job, I work at a counseling agency, and so I do see the rawness of people's lives and hardships daily. And so not bringing that heaviness home, I had to train myself on that, but learning that other people's experiences, while they are so special and valuable and powerful and at times challenging, I cannot ever own any of them. Because when we start owning other people's stuff, that's when we start to burn out. We only have our lives to live, no matter how many things we throw on our plate. And if we're trying to own everyone else's lives or everyone else's problems or issues, we are neglecting our own brain, and we are very, very dysregulated in so many ways. So I'm not perfect at it, but that is one of the ways that I try to find a little bit of balance in all the things that I have. I also try to protect some spaces of time that I have, because maybe some days I don't get to see my husband except for when we're going to bed at night, right? Or waking up in the morning, because that's just how busy it gets. Trying to carve out moments and times to protect your space is so important, especially when you are in a hectic time of life, because that is going to help you to prevent feeling extra exhaustion or extra burnout that's not really necessary if you just take a couple of those steps.
I like that. That's really cool. Okay, so now kind of shifting into your podcast, your content creating that you do now. What prompted you to start that? What was it that, you said, you know what? I want to do this. I want to make, it started with a podcast. So I guess we'll start there. What was it that made you decide, I want to have a podcast and I want it to be the way that you have it? If you want to talk about the way you format it, and why is it that way? Why do you keep doing it? What is it that draws you to do that?
Yeah. I appreciate you asking me this, first of all, Brent, because it allows me to reflect on why I started, and that's always a good reason to keep going, right? Mm-hmm. So something I didn't really tap into too much, because I'm trying to, keep stories and things brief, but beyond some of the stuck moments that I've shared and challenges in life or in sports specifically, there have been moments in a specific chapter of life right before I moved to Tennessee that I was definitely at my lowest I've ever been in life. And it was definitely because I did not know how to handle or interact with people that I deeply cared about and wanted to care for, who were suffering mentally. Because that's the first time I'd really been exposed to that. And so I ended up being in quite a few toxic sort of relationships, being more of lifelines for people. And I don't know the studies on this, but I'd like to say that's actually way more common than we would think for student athletes specifically. And so I do want to help support other athletes in the future in that. But that was one of my experiences. And so I was dealing with a lot of stuff. Life was really heavy, and I felt really low moving to Tennessee. And then Tennessee was my healing chapter of life. With soccer, with going to therapy, with learning more about myself. Again, embracing my marriage at that time too. And it got me thinking, how many stories are out there of people that have learned incredible things, done incredible things, become incredible people, but we never hear those stories. And it just sat with me, because I know how true that is. And I wished almost that when I was going through my stuff, I could have listened or related to someone else who had already been through my stuff. And so that was the initial thought process to, what if I create a space where people can come and share their stories of all the things that have made their soul who they are today. And that was the initial thought. I had a coworker that helped me come up with the name of the podcast, and then I started learning like how do you record and what's the equipment and all those like sorts of details and things. But that was the bottom line. It was embracing the fact that everyone has a story, and there's been a lot of stories that have touched my life. And so I wanted to just be a space, just be a platform to project more of those experiences and stories to the people that needed it right now, just like I wish I had.
That's really cool. So, and you mentioned earlier too that you now like, and you didn't envision it being this at first. It sounds like at first it was just, hey, I want to hear people's stories. There's so many stories out there that, like you said, are untold, and I want to hear them. I want there to be a platform for it. And now you mentioned, well, it's that, and now it's also kind of gotten into content and all this stuff. And when I started following you, I was like, wow, you share some pretty cool stuff, and the way that you frame it. Like there was one, I don't remember how long ago it was or when I saw it, but it was like your brain is thinking this way right now, like, and just walking through all this stuff, like, oh, that's kind of cool. That's kind of interesting. So how did that become a part of what you do now, is like making the content and all that?
Yeah, it started where after I'd created some episodes in the podcast and I was posting a couple clips onto the page, I was just like, I want to be posting more than just podcast things. Like maybe I'm posting once a week or twice a week from a clip of a discussion that I had with someone on my podcast. But I've got so many thoughts going on in my head. Maybe I can just turn that into some positive content, right? And so let me be real about my experience with social media. I was very, very anti-social media growing up. Hater, like I would shut it down any second that I could. I was like, no, that is poison. Do not social media at all. Like get that out of here. And then when I was on my mission, actually, I had like a come to Jesus moment. And basically I just felt God speak to me and let me know, like, Sam, you need to repent. You need to change. And he was speaking about social media, and I was like, but I'm not using it. I think I'm fine. Yeah, I'm trying to stay like in the good zone. And then he was like, yeah, exactly. You're not using it. And I was like, oh, okay. I need to use it for good. I can't just like not use it and say, yep, I'm good. Check the box. It was instead, I need to start doing, I'm not doing something, I need to start doing that. I need to start spreading good. So that was the initial change that I had with social media in general. And then as I started this page, I honestly developed this newfound passion to create and be artistic in that sort of realm. But also, as I said earlier, just put into words what you've been through. Because sometimes it's hard to put into words what you've been through. And I've been in those spaces. And when I went to therapy, I really, really learned the power of narrative and the narrative that we tell ourselves. Unfortunately, in a lot of people's lives, the narrative that makes up their story and their world has been determined by other people or environments beyond their control. And it's not a very positive narrative, right? However, the way we speak to ourselves matter, and the way we are able to empower others through our story is even more incredible. So that's something that keeps me going as far as trying to create content that uplifts in that way and fills in those spaces between podcast episodes.
That's cool. I appreciate good content because there is just a ton of just garbage out there. And like you said, I still am, I'm not anti-social media, but if you were to look at my personal page, I really don't post anything. And that I think that's just more kind of my personality. And so since starting this business and then this podcast, it's become more of a thing where it's like, well, it's kind of a necessary thing. You got to post, you got to do this, you got to have a social media presence. But then, like you said, but I want to create good content, something that people look at and they say, that makes me feel good. And I will say, there's not been one reel that I've seen of yours that's like, well, why'd she say that? Like, I don't feel very good when I don't like that, you know? Like, I leave them, I'm like, hey, I like that. Like I said, that brain one, I was like, I've never seen a reel like that. That's really, really cool. I like that. So keep going with that. I think we need more creativity like that out there on social media. Um, so you mentioned that you've had, some really cool conversations on your podcast. What is one, you don't have to get into like the crazy details of everything, but what's one or a couple of conversations that you've had with people that really have stuck out to you?
Yeah, man, when I was thinking about this before we got on, I was like, how could I narrow down one conversation that has just hit me? Because I feel like every episode, I just feel so honored with people sharing their experiences and stories with me.
Amen to that.
But there are times when something that one of my guests shares, it sits with me for a while. And one that I can probably touch on here is, and I love that this is the case. I did an episode with a friend from that junior college in Arizona, and what I love about this episode that I did is a lot of my other guests, maybe they are content creators, or maybe they are influencers or coaches in a form on social media. They have a following, they have an audience, they're doing their thing, or they are quote unquote like qualified in their field. But this type of conversation that I had with this individual, she's not this crazy content creator or this influencer, but man, she's a powerhouse. And I just remember always feeling that in any conversation I had with her back at the JUCO. And something that she shared that stuck with me, which is why I'm highlighting this one, I guess, is she was talking about opportunities. And we discussed how hard change can be in life. Again, no one likes it, but there's nothing as constant as change.
Mm-hmm.
And so something that she shared that it's going to stay with me probably for a long time is change is opportunity in disguise. And it sat with me, and I was like, holy cow, what a bar of wisdom there. Because something that a lot of people fear, change, is just being masked as an opportunity, is how she looked at it. It was a lens that she looked through. And again, I love reframing and changing your perspective. And so that was something that really sat with my soul, and one of many of the conversations that I've had. People are always sharing bars of wisdom, but that's one that I wanted to highlight today.
I like that. Change is opportunity in disguise. That's really cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. I have two more questions for you. First,
Sweet.
before we wrap up. So, how, with everything that you've gone through and everything that you're doing now, how do you now personally define success versus how you used to probably define it when you were younger, in high school? How do you now define what is success to you?
Man, this is a great one. This is a great question. I love this. Success for a lot of people, and at one point in life was also my understanding or description, is result. Success is result, or success is performance of a sense. But I've since shifted my thought process and my definition of what it means, because to me now, success is progress and not results necessarily. And there can be a billion analogies that could help someone understand that, but the simpleness of it is that numbers, results, like timelines, getting things done, checking all the boxes, that is not going to leave you as fulfilled as simply noticing the growth that you've made as a person, or the growth that you've made in a specific area of life. If you're trying to look for success in your work, unfortunately, some businesses have to focus on results, but how can you look at it as progress instead of getting to the end line, right? I'm training for a half marathon, and what's been so cool about this journey is I know I'm going to get to that race, and I'm going to cross the finish line. But crossing the finish line is not the most exhilarating thing. The most exhilarating thing is all these training runs that I've done to lead up to that point. These months and months of mileage that I've done, like the amount of miles that are in my shoes that I've ran, right? That experience, that progress, it's the climb that makes the peak so glorious, right? But you can't focus on the peak, you have to focus on the climb.
I really like that. Talk about bars of wisdom, Sam. You've dropped quite a bit. Why, my goodness. All right. Last question for you. If you could tell someone, there's, the people that listen to this episode, there's going to be people that are feeling stuck, right? And they're going to be thinking you potentially, well, that's nice that Sam talks about this and she says this, and that was really cool, but it won't work for me, right? What would you tell someone, whether they're an athlete, whether they're just a normal person going through life that feels stuck, what would you tell them is the key to getting unstuck?
What I would tell someone in that space is you're not stuck, you're seeking. Sometimes we feel stuck in life, or you feel stuck in life, because you don't have the answers yet, or you don't have the vision or the guidance. The path's not laid out ahead of you right now. Or maybe you're in a waiting phase of life. That happens a lot. Lots of people are in waiting phases, in between the tick marks of life, in between the big exciting things. But you're not stuck. You're seeking. You're continuing to seek new parts about either yourself, the world around you, your environment, relationships, things that excite you. Even though you may not be in an extraordinary chapter of life, you are still in a chapter that's making up your novel. And if you only narrow down your book to only extraordinary pages, let's be honest, it would be like, 10 pages of your whole novel. Not every day is going to be extraordinary. Life's going to be so much ordinary and so much general stuckness in life. But I think more than anything, when you feel that way, sit with it for a moment, let it sit in, recognize it and acknowledge that feeling, because I don't want to just push it away. And then when you feel you have acknowledged that space, think about what reframe can you put? What lesson could this chapter of life be giving you, or what opportunity? Remember, change is opportunity in disguise. So anyways, some things there. Hopefully one of those things is helpful.
That's great. Hey, thank you so much for your bars of wisdom that you dropped. I think for me, if I could narrow down something that's, I feel the same way the way you feel. I have not been at it as long as you have. But every person that I talk to, no matter who they are, I always feel just uplifted after talking to them, and just like, man, I learned something there. And so I appreciate everything that you've shared today. I think the thing that stuck out to me was what you said about faith, and just that different definition of faith. Even when we don't necessarily get what we want by, quote, exercising our faith, faith is also continuing to go forward, even though we may not understand that. So thank you for everything that you shared. So real quick, before I let you go, how can people find you, see the things that you're up to? Just give yourself a free plug.
Sweet. Yeah, so I know it's a mouthful of a handle, but the Soulful Project, so it's soulful_project on Instagram. And my podcast, you can find it on Apple Podcasts, you can find it on Spotify, Amazon Music, the main ones, right? But there's an episode every week that I release with a new guest, and I've had guests from all over the world, so you never know who's going to be on the other line for the episode, but I guarantee it will be someone in the 50 plus episodes that I have shot that you will relate to and that you could share with a friend. So yeah, follow along. If you want to be inspired, follow along for wellness, and just to keep being soulful, keep living with keep living with meaning and purpose in life.
Awesome. Hey, thank you. Yeah, give her a follow. She's got some great content, and her podcasts they're great. They're fire. So give her a follow, give her a listen. All right, Sam, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to everyone that's listening. We appreciate your support. And remember that progress begins with one step. We'll see you next time.